Now, Georgi Dinkov, how are you, sir?
All right, just drinking my Red Bull, trying not to fall asleep.
I'm also extremely tired. I had a cab ride from hell getting back here from the market. So for anybody that doesn't know, I live extremely far away from the city now, and it's a big trek to go in there and get milk. It's I think it took me 3 hours to go here, to walk down the road, to get to a bus, to take a cab, to go into city and walk to my destination. So, yeah. What is new in your life, Georgie?
I want to say there's a lot of new things in my life, but I guess on the research side, we are going to start soon offering service of like nail and hair analysis, but not only for minerals, but also for like steroids and other things that we can confirm that we can reliably measure. And it should be really cool because like several studies have already come out that said that this can entirely replace tissue measurements. In other words, biopsies, which are extremely painful, as most people know, extremely expensive too. And the other good thing is that basically, even if you take like an actual tissue analysis, like if you take a biopsy from like a muscle, right? It still only tells you like the amount of steroids that are there right now, and because the turnover is so fast in living tissue, you're basically looking at the results would not be that much different from blood in terms of like what time period they span. They'll be more reliable, right? Because you can have like very low estrogen in the blood, but very high in the tissues, right? But it still doesn't tell you the long-term picture. Well, with nail, hair, and ear wax, recently a study came out. Basically, you can kind of get the same like analogous measurement similar to hemoglobin A1C, HbA1c, which gives you like the average value for your blood glucose over the last 3 to 6 months. And something similar can be done with earwax, hair, and nails. So we're testing the method right now, see how well it works. The metals we already tested, they work pretty well. So hopefully we'll be able to offer this as a service in the next couple of months.
This is crazy. When did you decide to do this? I've never heard. This is really surprising to me. So,
remember like several people asked Ray, like, hey, Ray, what do you think about hair analysis? And he's like, it's a good idea, but it's probably not very reliable because people wash their hair with all this. He said nails will be much more accurate, especially the toenails of the big toe, right? And that's exactly what we tested already for metals. And I can send you a sample report. It looks really good. Actually, speaking of which, why don't I send it to you right now, and you can maybe show it on the screen.
How are you going to send it to me exactly? Did you get my Telegram link, by the way?
Nope, I didn't. When did you send it?
Okay, never mind. Again, guys, sorry for the echo. I tried to buy sound blankets for this room and still will buy them, but I think they're going to take like a month to arrive. And so hopefully I can just talk up really close to this mic. You're going to send it to me via email?
Yeah, we're just logging right now. See.
Guys, thank you so much for joining us Friday night. Thanks for hanging out. Sincerely appreciate it. And I think I'm going to do a solo show next week, and then Ray will be on the 30th. So the day before the new year, but that should be fun.
Man, and Google with its stupid multi-factor authentication now. This is horrible. I don't even know why these people do that. It's like it makes your life progressively more difficult, and if anything, is going to make people stop using that service. Let's see, test 01. Yeah, that's the sample report. Actually, it's not a sample; it's a real report of a real person. So the values are legit.
People are saying the echo is not bad. That is incredible. It's horrible to me. So that's really good to hear. Thank you, guys. Sincerely appreciate it. What? So you just saw an opportunity? So if I send you a toenail or something, what is going to be done to that? It will be ground down, and then how will that be analyzed? So
we have a liquid chromatography mass spectroscopy machine, which we started renting from one of the large vendors, Thermo Fisher Scientific. And basically the team in Bulgaria is doing all the analysis, and they're pretty thrilled, especially about like the steroid analysis and all of these other things, because so far the only studies that are out there is basically analyzing cortisol and mostly in hair, right? But the Idealabs, the World Anti-Doping Association, they have very advanced capabilities, but they're not accessible to the public, where they basically analyze hair for like doping abuse, right? For people taking steroids and all kinds of other performance enhancing drugs. So we will try to do something similar, initially focusing on steroids, because I think we want to dispel a few myths, and we're going to use this for publications as well. First, we're going to test some menopausal women's nails and hair and see if the estrogen is really high, right? And if it's high, I think that's one of the key things that everybody's been criticizing Ray about. They're like, well, where is the evidence that menopause is actually a condition of excess estrogen? All the studies that are out there saying it's actually deficient, right? And yes, we've discussed like estrone sulfate and prolactin and breast cancer, like estrogen receptor positive is higher in postmenopausal females, et cetera, but it's all circumstantial evidence. If you can show in nails that there's basically sufficient amount, or ideally higher than optimal, right, for menopausal women, I think that basically seals the deal. We will probably they will probably drone us. Hillary will send its drones, so whoever's in the pharma companies will start calling you and say, like, why are we paying you all this money to have all this equipment and all these drones when you allow this punk to sit there and basically undermine one of our core theories?
Okay, so I didn't know. I guess I just never put together that steroids can be measured in the toenail. I thought that was just like minerals and vitamins and stuff.
Everything.
Wow.
And actually, the steroids are particularly interesting because it gives you a long-term assessment of your steroid profile. Long-term over like at least a month, which I think is sufficient, right? And also, a study came out recently about earwax, and they're claiming it can do it can represent 3 to 6 months, which is huge. I mean, it's basically the equivalent of that HbA1c that I mentioned, but for many other things. So I think medicine eventually will move in that direction, and basically blood tests will become they wouldn't become obsolete, but they're right now, unless you have a really already established pathology. Let's see, nail analysis.
Are you still searching on your email?
No, I found it. I'm emailing you right now. Minerals attached. Okay. So I've been thinking about this for a long time. It's just we didn't have the equipment. And basically, it's interesting from both scientific point of view, and also as a service. Basically, why should people pay? I mean, they spend tons of money on doing these blood tests, and first of all, you have to know how to interpret them, right? I mean, sometimes basically, like if you're it's the progesterone to estrogen ratio that really matters, not necessarily the absolute values. It's the cortisol to DHT ratio that matters, not necessarily the absolute values. But if you do the test at the wrong time, let's say you're stressed out, or like you're way too relaxed, it doesn't represent your baseline. All of these things. Basically, the results are not going to be very reliable, and in order to be reliable, you have to continue doing these tests over and over and over again, and you end up spending, I don't know, a lot of money, and then you have to aggregate these tests, and you still have to interpret them. And we're hoping that with the nail, especially nail analysis, you basically do one test maybe once or twice a year, and that really gives you your entire hormonal profile over the last 6 to 12 months. I think that, a lot of people have expressed interest. Now I know G-Ball used to do a lot of these things, but he was doing them only for minerals. And the interesting thing is more than minerals. Oh, also thyroid, right? So we can probably prove that having elevated levels of thyroid hormone, or actually having low TSH, doesn't always translate to good thyroid function. In other words, if we can show in the cell that there's a deficiency of T3, or there's increased levels of reverse T3, and then this is not reflected in the blood tests, then basically again the tissue / nail, which is the nail test or hair test, it trumps the blood test. So if nothing else, a lot of interesting research will come out of this, and we're going to try to publish. So speaking of which, you'll probably start seeing more publications with my name over the next couple of months. I sent you the report, so I don't know if you got it.
I think I did. And then, so you have a list of steroids and vitamins and things like that on when somebody sends in the nail for a certain price, or what are you thinking?
Yeah, exactly. So we're going to, initially we're going to start with a cortisol to DHEA ratio inside of the cell, because that so far has kind of emerged as the number one predictive biomarker for all-cause mortality. So it's not, well, because it's one of the best predictors for stress, right? I'm sure you've seen the post that I've made about basically cortisol to DHEA ratio being predictive of your risk for developing PTSD, right? Developing psychosis, like how quickly you age, right? All of these things, heart failure, but the study after study have shown that it's so far the best predictive biomarker of all-cause mortality, which to me is that it's a very good biomarker of systemic health. You can try to do something similar with the cortisol to DHEA sulfate ratio in the blood, but cortisol and DHEA sulfate ratios, they can vary tremendously in a matter of minutes. So again, that's really where like the nail analysis shines, because it's not that sensitive to, you can have an extremely stressful day, one day of the month, or even a few days of the month, but it should balance out, like basically if it's an anomaly. If it's not an anomaly, then basically it'll show up on the nail as basically elevated cortisol to DHEA ratio. So we'll start with that, these two hormones, and then we're going to try to expand to estradiol, because it's very important to show that estrogen can be high in the cell and be low, low on blood tests, or at the very least not related, not correlated, and then progesterone, and then basically the androgens and aldosterone, and I think that pretty much covers it. It's like you can do these basic hormonal tests, and vitamin D. It is hard to if just from that, like 5 or 6 hormones, you can get a pretty good idea of where you stand metabolically.
If this works, you're going to have quite a business on your. If this is more accurate than blood, that would be
We already know it's more accurate than blood. I can show you the studies. I mean, basically, people are saying like the groups that are working on this are saying, why are we bothering with blood again? And then they answer their own question. Well, there's only 3 large companies doing these things all over the world. That's why, because they will not allow anybody else to talk about anything else.
Somebody just sent me an email. I think they spent $300, but it was like the bare bones core list of tests. But I was like, man, that is so expensive. I mean,
what kind of tests? Minerals or other things? Because from what I understand, the only thing available commercially so far in terms of steroids, there's only one company out there, and it does cortisol and hair. That's about it.
No, it was like the prolactin, parathyroid hormone, total cholesterol, TSH, vitamin D, etc. Like things like that.
They got it done in hair?
No, just through blood.
Oh, through blood. Yeah. So this thing will basically be like, this report will probably be basically about 150 for the entire thing. And then basically for the hormones, it really, since we haven't done it yet, it depends on like the preparation, because what you have to do is you have to ground the nail. For minerals, it's easy, because the way it works is you dump the nail or like the hair in an extremely strong acid, and it dissolves everything. But the one thing the acid cannot dissolve is minerals, right? So they stay there. So you destroy everything else, all the organic material, and the only thing that remains is the inorganic. Now, it makes the analysis relatively easy, right? So the preparation is relatively easy. However, for the steroids and other things, you can do that because the acid is going to dissolve the steroids as well. So you have to do something else. You basically have to grind the nail or in the hair into extremely fine particles. And you can try to do it by hand, which will take a long time. And it's still, you don't guarantee that the particle size will be uniform. Or you have to either spend a lot of money to buy a so-called sonification grinding machine, which basically uses ultrasound to really pulverize it into very fine powder. And then you have to use solvents to extract whatever is in the nail, right? And then, finally, when you prepare the liquid, then you can try to analyze for steroids. But we have to test how well the extraction process works. We have to test how well the grinding process works. Some people may not send enough, like a sufficient amount of nail or hair, right? All of these things need to be ironed out. But there are plenty of publications on successful analysis of both hair and nail for cortisol. And at least, 1 or 2 publications talking about doing it for many other steroids and listing, like referencing the WADA process, which is secret. They don't, but it's there, right? So if you're an athlete, not only urine, but they'll ask you to basically donate like either like a cheek swab or a piece of hair, and they will do the analysis. But they test specifically for the doping agents. However, many of them are steroids. They do test for plain testosterone because it's a doping. They do test for plain DHT because it's also a doping agent. And they test for spironolactone, right? All of like many different things that are steroid in nature. they already have methods for those. So we know it's possible. The question is how easily can it be done by us and on a relatively, massive, well, it's not a massive scale, but scalable.
And then what is the name of this testing going to be precisely?
I don't know. George's ultimate crystal ball.
You always have these good names cooked up, and you haven't cooked up a name for the testing yet.
Not yet. The crystal ball, the endocrine crystal ball. I don't know, something like that. We'll see. I haven't decided. I don't want to get my hopes up too high. We know the minerals work, but I want to see that the steroids work well, and then I'm going to start thinking about names.
Fair enough. Okay, before we get into articles. You had the article on the forum, it was like fascism has come to the U.S. What do you want to mention about that before we move on?
Well, it looks like the government of Austria is starting to back up a little bit from its initial promises. It did look initially because Austria and many European countries have these laws on the books that if you're charged with a fine and you refuse to pay it or even can't pay it, well, I don't know which one is worse. Instead of taking over your property, which is what happened in the States, right? They'll come and repossess. They in many European countries, they'll simply throw you in jail. They don't call it jail. It's kind of like a coercive confinement until you agree to pay your fine. But guess what? You're still in jail. And now they're saying this option, jailing people for not paying the fine, has been stricken down from the proposed law. So they will, like the proposal right now is all the unvaxxed will pay up to 600 euros per infraction for a maximum of 6 such fines annually. But it hasn't been finalized yet. That is the current proposal. And if it basically, many people are commenting that for around 3,600 euros a year, you'll more or less be buying yourself a little bit of freedom. But it's not a freedom. You'll still be banned from all of the other public places that the vaccinated are allowed to go to. Now, the scary part, not so much the scary, but because we've expected it, they've already said, and the same thing has been happening in the United States, that they've already told the vaccinated that it looks like you guys will have to take the booster every 3 months. Otherwise, you'll be just as vaccinated as the fully unvaxxed. So we'll see how this plays out. I think many people up until, recently didn't realize that this is going to turn into this nightmare of, here you have your freedoms, and then now you don't. Now you have them, now you don't. And you basically keep taking the jab for as long as indefinitely, for as long as you're alive. So we'll see how that goes. I think there's a storm brewing. The question is whether the elite is going to try to diffuse it by pretending to capitulating and doing something else, or by doubling down, just like they're doing in Australia. Have you seen the news about maybe I should call them concentration camps in the northern territories, where they basically rounded people up, and there was news today of like a youngster, 2 youngsters escaping from one of the quarantine camps, and there was this panic. The northern territories is one of the most remote areas in the world. If you're going to if you run around there, the only chance of infecting somebody is a kangaroo, or like a toxic, like a poisonous spider, or I don't know. There's a much bigger chance you're gonna die within like a few miles of the place where you escaped from than actually causing any viral harm to other people.
Yeah, this YouTuber named Really Graceful, she did a good video on Howard Springs, and this girl went there, and people should just listen to her account because it's like crazy. She says, you feel like you're in prison, you feel like you've done something wrong. And like she couldn't leave her porch, and if she did, it would have been like 5,000 Australian dollars. It's literally, and also she didn't even test positive. She had like been with somebody that did test positive, and then but throughout the whole process, she never tested positive via PCR test. It was literally like ludicrous. She was dead to rights in the whole situation. She couldn't do anything at all.
Why don't you invite her to come and move in, live with you? She looks fine to me.
I am in a celibate lifestyle in the middle of the Mexico desert.
If this woman joins you, that will be the end of your celibate lifestyle.
I am stocking up on napkins and vinegar and things for the apocalypse. So I'm not really thinking about companionship these days. That part of my life is over.
Are you buying hamsters to combat the loneliness like we used to do?
So there's a dog here, and my landlord is like, Danny, if you feed that dog, it can be yours. It's named Oreo. but I think it's been severely abused. It acts really off, and you'll be petting it and it will like really like it. Then it will just like freak out and run away. And
or try to bite you, or like squeal.
No, it's not violent at all. It's just, it will run away really quickly. So I remember what Ray said to that, the person with the question, like, body pleasure for a traumatized dog, but it might slip it some progesterone or T3 or something. But anyways, if I could wrangle that dog, I'd really have something
DHT
going.
works really well on dogs, apparently. I have several people emailing me already, like very old dogs with tumors recover completely, and they started becoming really jovial. Of course, don't overdo it, because it can have the same, estrogenic effects if you give it too much.
And last thing here, this is from Reuters. Exclusive IMF, 10 countries simulate cyber attack on global financial system. So this was on the 9th, which was yesterday. And so I think the only thing to do is to maybe pull cash out or something.
Pull cash out, like buy ammo, make sure like whatever, weapons or whatever defense mechanisms you have in place that are nearby. Yeah, I don't know. We'll see what happens. But I think that at this point they're kind of telling you what the next steps are. Because the virus narrative is falling apart. Doesn't look like there's going to be any kind of a major war. In fact, I think Russia, China, and the United States are all like just different faces of global cap. I mean, look at what's happening. Everybody's introducing masks and mandatory vaccinations. So it's just, to me, it's just theater, right? Or just various areas of the world are under various levels of control. But the fact of the matter is, I don't think there's any complete independent territory except Africa, or other smaller countries around the world that are just not interesting to the global cabal. But that may change very quickly, because they like their profit, and if they can't get enough profit from the current slaves, they're gonna try to add more slaves to the herd.
They already have all the money, though. They don't need. I think isn't the whole purpose is to kill everyone.
I think the whole purpose is to kill all the people that are being owed money, such as the pensioners and everybody else who is basically either a retiree, or in other words, useless eater. Mm-hmm. Now, of course, according to them, most people are useless eaters, but I think they still need like a small cohort of maybe the current upper middle class about to become severely impoverished, because these people still maintain the illusion that they have a chance of breaking through the glass ceiling and joining the elites, which of course will never happen. The only thing that could happen potentially is, I don't know, in very, very, very extremely rare circumstances, they can reach the level of, I don't know, the founders of Robin Hood, or maybe like Brin and Sergey Brin and Larry Page, or maybe even Bezos, right? But even that's how extremely unlikely that is. These people like literally one in a billion. So I think they still need some people, at least until their general AI comes into being, which they believe is going to be soon. I have seen no evidence that this is any closer than it was 100 years ago. And everybody else, I think the plan for everybody else is to go away. Because as it currently stands, once the baby boomers start retiring en masse, and since 2/3 of them don't have any retirement savings, it means they're going to be relying on Social Security almost exclusively, right? There's no way you can meet the obligations towards these people with the current budget and the current state of the economy. The only way to do it is if you continue printing money, but we've already seen that basically the elite doesn't want this to continue, because it destroys I think they still care about the dollar, to be honest with you. What's his name? The Fed chairman, Jerome Powell. He basically said interest rates will rise, and he did not back down like he did the last couple of times. Now, of course, there's always a chance he's going to change his mind in the future, but it looks like the party of free money is largely over. Of course, only for the plebs. There will always be bailouts for the big banks and the big boys, and the girls. But for the plebs, I think like the party is over. I don't think there'll be any more steamy checks for individuals, or if there are any that are being distributed, it's going to be as part of a UBI. Which will come with all of the terrible strings attached. Like you basically, I think the number one will be you'll have to be vaccinated. No vaccine, no UBI for you, and things like that.
Yeah, they're talking about stakeholder capitalism. So you work for some cryptocurrency by doing good things. Have you read about that with the World Economic Forum?
Yeah, basically they're saying that everybody will have a bigger stake in the game, or at least ostensibly, and then yeah, the crypto the central bank digital currencies are fundamental to this plan. But the thing is, who decides who issues and how much of that central
They
bank
do.
digital currency? And it's not going to be the plebs. Yeah. So this whole thing of stakeholder, I think, comes down to you only get to choose which cause you get, you put your efforts towards. But I don't think you can bargain over like how much you get paid, or basically like how long you work or things. I think these things will be set for you, which largely removes any kind of a choice, right? I mean, if I tell you like, okay, you can choose from 5 different concentration camps to go, Danny. Look at this massive choice that I've given you. Aren't you ecstatic? Of course, you own nothing. You own nothing, and you'll be happy, right? So I given you all this choice. Why are you unhappy? So it's not different. There's no such thing as improved stakeholder capitalism. If there ever was, it was probably around the first half of the 20th century when basically the stock market still worked relatively unrigged, and people actually owned through shares with voting power in all of these companies. All of this is largely gone the way of the dodo at this point. Most of the stocks that you're buying these days, they're not only they're not Class A shares, so you can't vote. They're also not Class B shares, which entitle you to share in the profit, usually, at least for the big companies like Google, Amazon, Microsoft, etc. But also the nominal value for each one of these shares that you're buying is actually like 1,000th of a cent, right? So when you buy a share, what do you actually buy? What do you own? And the answer is nothing except that 1,000th of a cent. That's how much the company is obliged to pay you if you try to redeem that share with the company. So it becomes a Ponzi scheme. In other words, if you buy this piece of paper, the only way you're going to make money is if people decide to buy more of these shares with absolutely abysmal nominal value in the future, so you can sell yours at a higher price. In other words, the classic rule of the Ponzi scheme. The early adopters get paid by the subsequent adopters, and those get paid by the other subsequent adopters, and so on, until you run out of people. At which point, I think the whole thing will collapse. And the reason it hasn't collapsed yet is precisely the bailouts. So if there are bailouts, if people are given money and these companies are given money, they buy back their shares, which are sold on the open market, which pushes the stock price up. People see this and say, oh my God, this company must be doing tremendously well. Let me buy more. But it's not that the company is doing well. It's that the company was given truly free money, and they're using that to buy back their shares, mostly from the executives, right? Because that's how they cash out, but also from the open market. And of course, if the company keeps buying its own shares, then this is going to push the price up. So that's really what most of the stock market is these days. It's basically which company got the most money to buy the biggest amount of shares, of its own shares on the market. Very few companies these days are the so-called unicorns. In fact, I don't think a single one of them is a true unicorn. It comes down to how quickly each one of these unicorns managed to get to the point of basically too big to fail. And that has become a business strategy. You become too big to be removed or to acquire. Or actually, acquisition is not a bad thing, but you basically become too big to go away. And that really is the business model. You may be losing money. You may have been losing money for years. Maybe you have a terrible executive team. Maybe you treat your employees like crap. None of this really matters as long as you are big enough and either they're interested companies interested in acquiring you, or you're big enough that the government thinks that if you go under, things will turn ugly politically, and they're willing to bail you out. That's all there is. Very, 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 very few companies these days produce anything of value. At least the ones that are being traded on the public stock exchanges.
Last thing, and then we can move on. But so the 4518 is from Oysters in late 2019, and then I checked. I haven't been buying these off Amazon. I was just curious, but I checked again, and it was 78.49. And so that's a no joke price increase. And then
that's the economic recovery for you. Yeah. Why aren't you happy?
But I mean, this hasn't even really kicked off yet. So I feel like that's a brutal price increase.
It's
and so
almost 100% increase.
Yeah. But iHerb.com still has these, but again, take everything we say with a grain of salt, but I am buying like a madman right now. Like I have 6 of these boxes come into my house, I, I, I'm definitely worried for the future, and I'm trying to get like those Berkey filters, the fluoride ones and the black ones, and like there's tons of fluoride and arsenic in the water here. And so things that I know I'm going to be using well into the future, I'm trying to buy as much of those as possible right now, just because, I mean, this price.
If you look at that report that I sent you on the nail analysis, the arsenic levels are high, and that person just happens to eat a lot of chicken and rice.
Oh, wow.
And that kind of confirms it. They were pretty surprised when I said, like, do you eat a lot of rice? And he said, yeah. How did you know? It's like, I eat that every day. I'm like, well.
Isn't there low arsenic types of rice?
There may be, but considering that this is a person in Bulgaria and the food there, the commercially sold, is pretty crappy. I mean, the European Union is basically using the Eastern European countries as the dump of everything that the Western population would not buy. It's of really crappy quality. It gets dumped on the Eastern European countries.
I asked because when I went to the grocery store, I just bought like 2 things of rice. I don't even remember I think the last time I ate rice was in Japan, but I was like, what the hell if it's going to last a long time? But I don't, it was like sushi rice. So I don't know if it has arsenic in it. Anyways,
there might be a way. I think like the longer you boil it, and then like when you throw out that water, the less arsenic remains in the rice. It really depends how long I think the sticky rice has the least amount of arsenic left over.
I wonder if the chat knows. This seems like the chat would know this stuff. Okay, somebody's telling me to get strapped. Unfortunately, I don't think that's going to happen in Mexico.
To get what?
Strapped. Get a gun.
What's that? Oh, okay. Packing heat?
Okay, moving on here. Okay, what article did you have an affinity for?
I think the one that ruffled quite a few feathers was the last one. The fasting stress decimates gonadal steroidogenesis without changing both cortisol. And that was a pretty surprising finding too. Because remember how often we talk like, okay, why is fasting bad, right? Because it raises the levels of free fatty acids, suppresses glucose oxidation. Then all of these PUFAs that are being stored in your tissues, they get preferentially released. They start destroying your organs, especially thyroid, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But many of the fasting people, the proponents of either intermittent or long-term fasting, and by the way, this fasting only lasted 4 days. So yeah, it's not intermittent, but it's actually considered short-term fasting. I remember some of our friends like Jibo and many others claimed to be fasting for months, and they felt great. Which I was going to say, well, why don't you check your blood cortisol levels? They're probably pretty high, and this is mania. It's not exactly a sign of good health. Anyway, so long story short, the study demonstrated that blood cortisol actually did not increase during the 4-day fast. ACTH did increase, and blood levels of androgens dropped down to next to zero, a decline of 98% of testosterone levels in the blood. Just 4 days of fasting, 4 days. That's all it takes. And then the more interesting picture was actually in the testicles, in the gonads. So they said, okay, well, what's going on here? How can be that the cortisol remains unchanged in blood, but then suddenly like the androgen levels are getting decimated? Something must be going on at the gonadal level. So they looked at the testicles, and basically the picture there was abysmal. So cortisol levels were through the roof inside of the tissues, inside of the actual gonads, right? And basically the levels of most of all the precursors except pregnenolone were also down the drain. And again, the androgens were down to about 5% of what the control levels were. In other words, a 95% reduction. So 98% reduction of androgens in the blood and a 95% reduction of androgens inside of the gonads. So clearly, when you fast, what happens is that even though there may not be that much of a change inside your blood, there's a tremendous change inside of the tissues, which kind of plays into what I'm saying, what I said initially, why I think the nail analysis of steroids will come in very handy, because this can only be seen when you do tissue analysis. And basically, fasting, the authors say, is a form of severe stress, even if it only lasts for 4 days. And the body prioritizes, as we discussed many times. Basically, the androgens are considered a type of a luxury because they're used mostly for reproduction. And when you don't eat, the amount of energy you produce drops, and basically the body interprets this as a stress signal and upregulates the tissue levels of the stress hormones because it's preparing to start consuming those tissue levels. Oh, and by the way, the 4-day fasting caused atrophy of the actual testicles. They decreased their mass, probably because of the increased cortisol because they're made mostly of protein and fat. And just as we've discussed before, when cortisol rises, even though not in the blood, in the tissues, it starts to destroy that soft tissue. And then, these amino acids get dumped into the bloodstream, taken to the liver, and get converted to glucose. So there you go. Only 4 days of fasting can cause an acute and striking hypogonadism. Striking. You're basically getting a full decline of your most important androgens. And they investigated some of the mechanisms through which this happens. It turns out that fasting decreases the expression, in other words, the very production of the enzymes, the side chain cleavage, which synthesizes pregnenolone from cholesterol, and also the enzyme 3-beta hydroxysteroid dehydrogenase, which converts pregnenolone to progesterone. So it decreased those expressions. So you were producing drastically less, like a lesser amount of these enzymes. And then the enzyme that produces cortisol, the 11-beta hydroxysteroid dehydrogenase type 1, the expressions did not increase, but the activity increased dramatically. So there's some really interesting graphs. I mean, maybe I should have posted them in the study, but it's really like if you look at the levels of the different steroids that are in the gonads, you have a left bar for the controls, and you have the right bar for the fasted animals, and for everything except cortisol in the testicles, they were basically the bars for the fasted animals were nil. There was nothing there, right? Truly down to zero. And then for cortisol, I think it increased the levels of cortisol. I have a quote there, between 3 to 18-fold increase in cortisol. It's nothing to laugh about. If you get that amount of increase of cortisol in your blood, your doctor will immediately decide you have Cushing syndrome and send you for like an MRI of the pituitary and potentially even like a whole body CT scan, because you can have a so-called ectopic Cushing syndrome. Could be a tumor somewhere else, not just in your pituitary, that's producing either ACTH or cortisol directly. So 18-fold increase of cortisol is tremendous. And only 4 days of fasting was sufficient to cause that.
But I think a fasting enjoyer would say, but it was 4 days. So that was way too long. So what would you say to the intermittent fasters?
I will remind them of the other study, which I should have linked here, where it showed that intermittent fasting in humans decimated lean muscle mass while simultaneously increasing fat mass. So the ratio of lean mass to fat mass decreased drastically. It also destroyed the quality of their sleep. And the lead doctor of the study said, "My God, what have I been doing to my patients? I myself have been an intermittent faster for more than a decade. I'm stopping immediately, and I'll be telling my patients that I don't think intermittent fasting is a good idea." Remember, it was a human study, and I think it was either Stanford or University of California, San Francisco.
But everybody knows it increases autophagy, though. So.
Right, but so does consumption of glucose, Danny, and trehalose and fructose, and like many other good sugars. But I think there's even a study that consuming legumes does not, in fact, decreases autophagy.
Very interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, let's do one article, then I'll do a little break here. You added a bunch of DHT articles. So
the one DHT is anti-inflammatory is cortisol, but without the side effects. Even though it applied specifically to gastric inflammation, I think it was a really good and important article because it demonstrates if you go to a doctor and he or she thinks you have some kind of an inflammatory problem, chances are you'll be prescribed corticoid steroids. There's just no way around. There's no alternative, as they'll tell you. There's nothing else that acts as quickly and as profoundly as an inflammation blocker as the cortisol, right? As the glucocorticoids. And of course, they're going to try to downplay all of its known risks, such as, it's going to destroy your bones, it's going to destroy your muscles, it may make you insulin resistant, it'll destroy your sleep, right? It'll destroy your cognition, your mood, because it can cause depression pretty reliably and pretty quickly. All of these things may not even get mentioned, but if they do, it'll be more in passing. Like, you're like, don't worry about it. It's just a short course of corticosteroids, right? But more importantly, the message will be given to you is like, look, we have to weigh the benefits versus the risks. And considering that the benefits are great and there is no alternative, we have no choice but to give you corticosteroids. Now, if you try to talk about pregnenolone, progesterone, DHEA, you may get physically assaulted by a doctor. At the very least, he or she will laugh. You may get labeled as a crazy person. And in all likelihood, they'll just say, oh, whatever, there's no evidence that these act as anti-inflammatory agents. And this is one of the few studies that shows that not only do androgens, especially DHT, act as anti-inflammatory agents, they're as potent as cortisol and without the side effects. More importantly, the DHT was capable of reversing the fibrosis that occurred as a result of chronic inflammation, while cortisol did not. So DHT not only has the exact same anti-inflammatory effects of cortisol, it goes a step further and actually reverses the already established fibrotic pathology. Glucocorticoids do not do that. Now, I think progesterone would have done the same thing, right? But I like I kind of like the study because it contrasts DHT, such a villainous steroid, right? Progesterone at least gets some positive press. Well, it's hard to find anything in mainstream medicine, in like JAMA or British Medical Journal, or any doctor really to say, it's hard to find any doctor to say anything positive about DHT. And this study does. And it says that androgens should be considered as an alternative to glucocorticoids, especially in males. So the only problem with DHT would be, of course, like in females, it's going to lead to virilizing side effects such as, the voice will become deeper, body hair, et cetera, et cetera. But for males, given the results, I really see no reason why males should bother with cortisol. They should ask the doctor for DHT, and the doctor laughs, then maybe they should ask for progesterone or pregnenolone, or maybe find a new doctor, because if the conversation goes in that direction, the doctor probably already strongly dislikes you and will not be willing to, help you out.
I think that's 99.9% doctors would not give somebody DHT. But okay, what about, you said progesterone is another kind of...
Well, pregnenolone is another one. There's several articles show that pregnenolone directly actually decreases the expression of the TLR receptors, and they're key enablers of inflammation, especially due to endotoxin, right? Also, pregnenolone is now tested. There's a human clinical trial for oral pregnenolone as treatment for low back pain, which the clinical trial itself said it's likely due to endotoxin, or at least activation of TLR4 receptor. So after all of these years saying that, low back pain is idiopathic, it is of unknown cause, suddenly even mainstream medicine quietly, of course, without much fanfare, says, I think endotoxin is involved, so let's try pregnenolone. And of course, the claims continue. Pregnenolone is an inactive steroid precursor. It has no known role other than being a precursor to the other steroids. Well, guess what? It can do a lot more than that. Just like Pfizer. Pfizer is selling, I think it has at least 2 different SSRI drugs on the market. It's highly serotonergic, right? And then they, quote unquote, treat depression. Of course, they don't do any of that, right? But they cause a lot of fibrotic side effects. And not behind the scenes, but without much advertisement and fanfare, Pfizer is also now running clinical trials with a serotonin antagonist. Guess why? To give you this to reverse the side effects that the other drugs caused. So this is really how duplicitous and hypocritical medicine has become. They will gaslight you for as long as possible, and when you finally, basically, they cannot avoid the hard conversation anymore, and they have to admit something. They'll say, "Well, why? What's the big deal? We also have the antidote. Yeah, we poisoned you. We also have the antidote, and of course, there's no alternative. Where else? Where are you gonna go to? This suspicious, seedy-looking Georgie guy, so he can sell you some like steroid wares.
This Bulgarian wizard that created the bioenergetic.
Don't stay with the pros. We're gonna poison you and then cure you. I mean, of course, it's gonna cost you a lot of money, but at least you'll be a nice, controlled environment. And if you die, we're gonna write up that you died from COVID-19, and we're gonna get even more money from you."
That is the most insidious part of this whole thing, because everybody knows somebody that died allegedly of COVID-19. So this was like masterful in how they did it, because that is like cemented in so many people's minds that this is like this is a plague, Yeah. Did you see the video? I forgot what vaccine company it was that they said the Omicron variant would be 3 vaccines. Did you see that?
Yeah. Pfizer said 3 vaccines should be sufficient to protect from the Omicron variant. And I strongly recommend the CEO of Pfizer inserts those needles in his ear. Hopefully they reach his brain and I don't know, cause some kind of a short circuit or something, because maybe you'll snap him out of his psychopathy, because he cannot be that much worse than what he is already.
This happened in 1 year from should pregnant women take the vaccine to you're already on your second and you're getting your first booster, and now another 3. This is insane.
Yep. And every 3 months, Fauci just said it, every 3 months there'll be a booster, most likely. You see, they work in tandem, but they're so manipulative. Fauci says every 3 months a booster. They ask Walensky, the CDC chief, what do you think about what Fauci says? Like, we cannot neither confirm nor deny, right? And then like a few weeks down the road, she'll be the one spinning that story, and they'll ask Fauci, and he'll play the good cop. You're like, not so fast. Maybe it won't happen. Of course it'll happen. It's already planned. It's already like decided that it will happen. It's just a matter of like how they can run it through the wheels and not get like some kind of an activist court. Remember the Bush presidency? Like all of the judges that try to block some of his secret executive orders, he called them activist judges. So I think that's the only thing that's standing on the way between total control of the elite, or at least like total implementation of their psychopathic agenda related to the pandemic.
On that note, okay, you can follow me on Telegram, t.me/DannyRoddy. And I have been putting lots of like exclusive stuff on there that I haven't been putting on other social media. I do coaching on patreon.com/DannyRoddy. You can follow Georgie on twitter.com/hateit. Georgie, have you ever thought about making a Telegram channel for all your content?
Yeah, it's just, if I get blocked, I think that's what's going to happen. Well, good news. My account on Reddit was suspended.
That's good news.
And basically people emailed me and said like, and I don't know what I did. I mean, because I didn't really post much about COVID there, but I did get into several like quote unquote fights with some doctors about like cancer treatment and things like that. And then suddenly without any notification, my account on Reddit got suspended. So basically, like I try to use their tool. Like they have a contact form where you can ask for explanation or like a review. Because I said, look, I don't even know why I suspended my account. Like I don't know if I broke the terms of service or if somebody hacked into my account. And what is for like more than 3 months, there was no response. So eventually, I filed a lawsuit. And basically, like within an hour of me filing, actually at the local small claims court in DC. I get like a message from a guy who I guess is like an admin or something, and says, "Oh, it was a mistake. Your account at Reddit did not have an email attached to it, and during one of our like routine reviews, we basically disable all accounts that don't have an email attached to it." So I responded, How did it not have an email attached to it when I was getting notifications since 2005 when I signed up for that?
Yeah, how could you even set up a Reddit account without an email?
Exactly, without an email. And I was getting notification for every comment, upvote, downvote, anything that was happening, despite my attempts to actually disable you idiots notifying me excessively and spamming me, but I was getting them to my email account. He did not respond to that, but my account was fully reinstated. And we agreed that I'll drop the claim in the small claims court. So, yeah, I mean, if they wanted to, they could have probably like, I don't know, outsued me, outlawyered me. But it looks like even Reddit doesn't like being sued. So, small claims court, you don't need a lawyer. Just go and file a complaint. And if you have a legitimate case, they actually usually know on the spot. And from what I understood from the lady clerk that was there, I was not the only one filing these lawsuits against Reddit and other social media companies. Apparently, people are wising it up and doing this on a much more massive scale than I thought. So there's power in numbers. We're not completely powerless.
We are almost completely powerless. And then do you want to talk about quinone, which I purchased 6 of at full price, and you and I are not affiliated in any way, shape, or form. Do you want to talk about this product that I have in my hand?
I just decided to release it in olive oil at basically the same concentration, 2 milligrams per drop. It's organic olive oil. So it's extra virgin organic olive oil. So it's EVO with an extra O, to use Rachel Ray's term. Two reasons. Number one, everybody knows Ray has spoken against using MCT orally, or at least being extremely cautious about it, right? And two, one of the few other sources of vitamin K2, MK4 commercial sources is Thorne, and selling it in olive oil. And recently they announced that basically they will be fully enforcing all of their vaccine mandates, and they will fire anybody who refuses to vaccinate. And that caused a lot of consternation, and people started emailing me and saying like, dude, if you can come up with basically the same product, right? The same, actually ours has more, because I think theirs is like a milligram per drop.
1,200 milligrams per bottle, which is like $70. So yours is 49 for 1,500.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
way
So it's
better.
more.
Yeah.
Yeah. And those are really were the two main reasons. And so far, by the way, it seems to sell better than the one in SFA esters and ethanol. The ones people who buy the SFA and ethanol version seem to prefer it topically, especially in the navel, famous navel route. The ones who buy the olive oil version seem to prefer it orally, even though several people have reported that topically works fine. It doesn't irritate their skin. And if they basically they don't add vitamin E, because some of them asked, I said, don't mix the K and the vitamin E, but some of them mix it with like lanolin from sheep wool. Other people mixed it with like glycerine. Other people mixed it with alcohol, and they're all saying like, or even by itself, because it's olive oil, seems to absorb relatively well to the skin, and apparently very well when rubbed on the gums or kept under the tongue.
Awesome. Thanks for doing that. I have it on my skin right now, but I'll probably give it a week or two before sometimes it takes me a second to notice something. Okay. So is there anything else that we have to talk about before we move on?
Well, I mean, like studies and other like.
Let's come back around to that. So let's talk about a few more of these articles.
Pick whichever one you like.
But do you want to talk about
the oral allopregnanolone coming soon to a pharmacy near you? So Pete's idea of using steroids and actually really almost any other molecule and mixing it with long chain fatty acids and or vitamin E in order to avoid the first pass metabolism and basically go through the lymphatic system. It seems that now Big Pharma is all over that method. And they're calling it cutting edge. They've patented, like, I don't know, like they may be infringing on Pete's patents, but I think Pete's patents may have expired already because they only last for about 15 years. And I think he filed his in the 90s. Anyways, long story short, a few months ago, actually last year, FDA approved an oral testosterone product. The trade name is Jatenzo. It's really a testosterone ester, testosterone undecanoate. Basically testosterone with 11 carbon long chain fatty acid, a saturated one, present in coconut oil, by the way. And then basically this thing is when you ingest it with or without fat, because of that fatty acid attached to the steroid, it steers it more towards the lymphatic system, and this way it avoids the first pass metabolism. And now you have an oral testosterone product on the market. And this company basically is now saying, oh, look, there is an allopregnanolone treatment for depression called Zulresso, right? But guess what? It's by injection, and it tends to cause excessive sedation. So why can't we copy the Jatenzo people and come up with an allopregnanolone with an oral allopregnanolone version? And what it is, the exact same thing that Pete has been describing for several decades. They don't use vitamin E, but they still use long-chain fatty acids, triglycerides, and they literally mix the allopregnanolone. They don't even dissolve it. And they call this like a cutting-edge patented technology, just mixing the steroid with those, probably olive oil. I would have said actually peanut oil. I think that I saw some comments on the forum that basically their glyph, their cutting-edge glyph technology consists of nothing more than mixing peanut oil and the steroid in a gelatin capsule. And they just announced the results from a preclinical trial with humans demonstrating, if you click on one of those links, you'll see some nice graphs that basically when people ingest that, but they don't talk about doses, compared to ingesting just the pure allopregnanolone, they're basically getting like the amount in the blood, just click on the other link. The amount in the blood is rises. Let's see. No, actually, the first one. This one should have the graphs, unless they remove them. Can you scroll down? There we go. So it achieves up to 75 times higher concentrations than consuming just the pure allopregnanolone. And they're hoping that they will be able to get FDA to approve this. And they're saying this should work for not just for mood disorders, but for pretty much any neurodegenerative condition as well. They mention Parkinson, they mention Alzheimer's, they mention ALS. So clearly they think there's a lot of potential in allopregnanolone. The bad news is that if this gets approved, I think FDA will basically, I mean, I'll have to stop selling it for one. And the other bad news is that I think that after these two products get approved, I don't think it'll be much longer before a company does the same with pregnenolone, progesterone, and DHEA, and these become basically fully prescription products, and FDA bans all other vendors from selling them. For people who say that this cannot happen because these products are protected, look at what happened to the vitamin B6 isomer known as pyridoxamine. FDA, it's a naturally occurring isomer of vitamin B6, and basically FDA, after a company did a clinical trial with pyridoxamine and demonstrated that it can fix or at least prevent chronic kidney disease, they petitioned the FDA, and FDA banned the over-the-counter sale of pyridoxamine in the United States. So they can do whatever they want. And I think, if anything, the last 2 years should have convinced most of the listeners that the law is dead. Whatever remains is just some, glossy veneer. And I think the only reason the powers that be are still have not gone full on martial law is that they're concerned that there's sufficient numbers of an armed populace in the United States getting strapped, as the people were saying in the chat, and they fear large scale conflict before they've managed to get their assets out or whatever it is that they're trying to do these days. But if you look at all of many of the Fortune 500 CEOs, they've retired and they've left the country. I think Bill Gates is only sticking around because he wants that vaccine, man. He just wants to vaccinate everybody. But Eric Schmidt, gone. He went to Cyprus. Sergey Brin and Larry Page, retired, gone. I think they have their own private islands. Who else retired? Twitter CEO, Jack Dorsey, retired, or at least quit, right? And we have a wave of CEOs that are quitting. Some people are saying that's because of the Ghislaine, what's her name? Ghislaine, I think. Maxwell trial. Yeah, Ghislaine Maxwell trial. Now she's going to expose a lot of powerful people. I think she'll get suicided long before we get to that point. But it may have something to do, or more likely, all the people with sufficient amount of money, they see where this is going, and they're basically going to wait it out on their private island, or a private, I don't know, some remote area, whatever bunkers they have, or their yachts.
A deep underground military base. That's what they're going to do.
Military base, yeah.
Did you see this paper? It says, by consequence, DHEA should be considered as a medication, not simply as a dietary supplement, and should therefore not be freely accessible to the public as it is now. But this whole paper was saying how it increased a person's well-being. And then the author was like, yeah, it should not be available.
Yeah, DHEA works. What's the FDA thinking of allowing? By the way, there's a law which makes it legal explicitly. But that law does not prevent the FDA from declaring it a new drug. The only reason it's still being sold out is that there is no drug on the market, commercially developed drug on the market, that is FDA approved for a specific condition. As soon as that happens, then the FDA can say, yes, but now it was free and over the counter, right? But now, because this company, and actually the company can explicitly petition the FDA and say, you have to ban it and pull it out of over-the-counter sales because it's interfering with our sales. That was the argument that company used, the one that was did a clinical trial with pyridoxamine. They called FDA and said, literally, yes, this is a naturally occurring vitamin. If you don't pull it out of the market, or if you don't ban its over-the-counter sales, all this work and all this money we threw into the clinical trial would have been in vain for us. Great benefit to the public, because now the public knows they can use vitamin B6 to prevent/treat kidney disease, but we're toast. And all of these hundreds of millions of dollars that we threw at this, basically we'll have no way of recouping that. And FDA obliged. So if they can ban a naturally occurring vitamin, you better believe it, they'll be able to ban a steroid.
Since I put in the title, do you want to give an elevator pitch for just what causes depression? And how is allopregnanolone even related to that?
Well, mostly energetic deficiency in the brain. I mean, like a drop of about 10% of ATP production in the brain is sufficient to cause a depression. I don't really think it should be a named condition. You should simply look at depression as the energetic state of your brain. I mean, many people have experienced foul moods over a couple of days, right? And then they manage to recover. Well, the ones who don't recover are basically in a chronic, energetically deficient state in the brain. T3 is known to cure even like a really severe and treatment-resistant depression. Methylene blue, probably the best example, because it has no other mechanism of action known other than improving bioenergetic state. And 15 milligrams, actually 5 milligrams 3 times daily, were shown in a human study to cure highly treatment-resistant depression, severe depression, in just 2 weeks. And to me, that proves beyond any reasonable doubt that the original causes of depression are bioenergetic. Now, of course, there are many peripheral causes that lead to that state. You can have high serotonin, you can have high cortisol, you can have high estrogen, you can have low thyroid, right? You can have high inflammation. All of these things, each one of them tends to activate the others, right? And whether in concert or by themselves, which is very rare, they lead to this state of energetic deficiency. And conversely, anything you can do to reverse, to basically block one or more of these stress mediators, usually leads to the improvement of the symptomatology. Remember that study that I posted, that 80% of people, of mentally ill people, recover on their own if their life conditions improve without any treatment, without seeing a psychiatrist, without seeing a psychologist, and definitely without taking drugs. So I think it's pretty obvious that if you are depressed, then you're probably oppressed. That is your real problem. The depression is just a symptom.
Great stuff. Thank you for that. Okay. So the oral pregnenolone, we did the DHT. What else do you think?
I think the scoliosis, because that maybe like it gathered some comments on the forum. Actually, I think so far most compared to all the other studies, because it's a known condition in older people, but now we're seeing an explosion of scoliosis in young adults, and I'm talking actually even in teenagers. We're talking about in even children. But the biggest explosion in these cases has been, just as with the colon cancer and the lung cancer cases, which used to be mostly for people over 50. Now we're seeing increase. Actually, all of the recent increase in colon cancer and lung cancer cases is due entirely due to the increase of the rate of these diseases in the younger population, which is people in their 20s and early 30s. Same thing with scoliosis, and basically it's a really depending on how severe it is, it's basically a twisting of the spine. I mean, you can have it in the form of in the shape of the letter S, right? It can go like sideways. I mean, it can go in any of the axes. So you can have basically a person could be a hunchbacked and also with like twisted back. So you can basically it's a 3-dimensionally twisted spine. And if you ask a doctor, they'll tell you they don't know what's causing. It's probably your bad posture. But no doctor will ever tell you that hormones are involved. They'll say it's some kind of a structural thing, like a physical cause, such as you're sitting the wrong way on your chair, maybe you're not exercising enough, or like you're lifting weights the wrong way, or something else is going on. But it's definitely a physical cause, a material structural cause. A gross cause, so to speak, and hormones are not involved. Well, this study begs to disagree, and it demonstrates that overwhelmingly people with moderate to severe scoliosis have very low levels of androgens in the blood, both males and females. And specifically, they show that the administration of androgens only corrected the scoliosis in vitro, at least changed the health of the cells, only if the conversion to dihydrotestosterone was able to occur. In other words, administering testosterone and finasteride did not correct the condition. So it was specifically dihydrotestosterone that does something through the activation, I guess they're saying, of the androgen receptor, which the effect is again anti-inflammatory. If you look at that sentence, it says androgen might play a protective role in the development of AIS to inhibit IL-6 induced abnormal chondrocyte development. IL-6 is one of the major inflammatory biomarkers. In fact, there are many drugs on the market that specifically target only IL-6, and they're typically used for treatment of inflammatory/autoimmune conditions, especially ulcerative colitis, Crohn's disease, psoriatic arthritis, rheumatoid arthritis. IL-6 inhibitors are like the bomb currently in terms of like being popular as drugs. And DHT was able to correct this pathology to the point where the authors are saying that basically the decreased androgen levels in females are a problem. They should be monitored, and it is a problem because most doctors think that as long as a woman is pumped full of estrogen, progesterone, actually not even progesterone, progestine, like a synthetic progestin, everything is peachy. And, a woman should not have high androgen levels. Well, the study begs to disagree. Apparently, bone health, the androgens are important for bone health in both males and females. And dihydrotestosterone, even though it has the reputation of a purely male hormone, just like estrogen has the reputation of a purely female hormone, it appears it has vital roles in females as well. And its levels should also be measured and monitored.
Wasn't osteoporosis one of the conditions that Ray said if you needed a big push in a direction? I think he said then it would be a DHT might be something to focus on or something to supplement, preferably. Yeah,
I mean, there's a study, of course, in mice or rats we discussed on one of the first podcasts we started doing, where basically showed that when you give the rats, they gave them DHEA, right? And then basically that cured their osteoporosis. They said, oh, that's because DHEA gets converted to estrogens, right? But then they gave the rats DHEA and an aromatase inhibitor, and it still worked, right? And then they gave the rats DHEA, but they also gave them finasteride, and it kind of worked, but not nearly as well. And they basically gave the rats DHEA and an androgen receptor antagonist, flutamide, and it fully blocked the effects. So it's the activation of the androgenic field, so to speak, because I don't like the word receptor. It's the activation of the entire androgenic cascade inside of the cell that it turns out to be vital for osteoporosis. And both men and women tend to suffer from it, women in higher numbers. So considering the fact that, women tend to produce more estrogen during their childbearing years, I think estrogen's role should be investigated. Recently, they found out that despite the fact that aromatase inhibitors actually in some people, cause joint pain, they're actually highly protective against osteoporosis. So little by little, this fake house of cards is crumbling, but unfortunately, I think it's too slow, and people are already so far down the rabbit hole in terms of being brainwashed that look, if you can't have a normal conversation with a person on the street, and you're not even allowed to show them counter evidence that there is no pandemic or at least being heavily exaggerated, if they're ready to go for your throat and slice you with a box cutter because you're not wearing a mask, then I think it's completely hopeless case to try to talk to them about steroids and what exactly is causing osteoporosis.
Great stuff. Okay. Man, how long have we been streaming for? About an hour, 16.
About an hour.
Let's go 15 or so, or 15 or so more minutes. Okay. What are you thinking?
Let's see. I think the cancer cells deprive immune cells of energy by devouring their mitochondria. That was kind of like a cool study. So apparently cancer cells can develop these proboscis almost like a trunk. And they use them to literally walk away from the primary site of tumor development. And that's how metastasis can happen, right? A cancer cell gets away and gets into the bloodstream and gets circulating around. And when it finds a hospitable place, in other words, another place that is energetically deranged, then it basically literally latches onto that organ or tissue with these trunks. They're almost like limbs. And it sits there and basically starts to divide and grow and form another tumor. And they found out that these tentacles, they call them in the article, are actually also acting literally like trunks. In other words, the cancer cell can use them to suck material through those trunks from another cell. And what they found out is that basically when cancer cells become energetically deficient and they're already in the invasive stage, they can puncture an immune cell with one of those trunks and literally suck the mitochondria out of the immune cell. So one, it gives energy to the cancer cell and allows it to reproduce. Two, it basically kills the immune cell. So I wonder, okay, so this sounds like like one of the stress hormones will be involved, because cancer cells, when they're not invasive, they don't have these tentacles. So I looked around, and of course, there's a study out there that says that estrogen and endotoxin actually are key in allowing the cancer cells to develop these invadopodia, is what they call them, and turn into these highly invasive cannibalistic cells that literally walk around and eat everything in their path, but selectively. They take only the mitochondria, because the mitochondria that contains the biggest amount of RNA/DNA material, which is what the cancer cell needs itself for its anabolic response to grow and divide and conquer, literally. So one way to I guess conversely to decrease the invasiveness of these cells is to block either estradiol or endotoxin, or decrease the synthesis of estrogen. And if you remember the study that I posted about 2 years ago that basically said that if you give an aromatase inhibitor, the immune system decline that occurs with aging is fully reversed. I suspect that, I think that study and the previous one that I posted vibe very well, because they reinforce each other's findings. So it's estrogen as a stress hormone that causes this degenerative development in cells, like a bizarre change in cell that will turn it into a cannibal and literally make it eat its neighbors. Was it Brother Barnes that said that when energy is insufficient, basically all signs of coherent life disappear, and you're getting basically these bizarre life forms that don't even understand what they're doing, but if they do anything well, it's to destroy everything around them.
Probably wasn't Barnes, maybe Warburg or St. Georgie, maybe. Probably St. Georgie.
Yeah, something about a bizarre like degeneration of life that turns into a primitive life form that doesn't even know what it's doing. There's no cohesion, and there's no unification even amongst cancer cells. All they do is devour whatever is in their path, including each other, which is one of the reasons. It's called necrotic cell death. One of the reasons why people with cancer have elevated levels of the biomarker lactate dehydrogenase in the blood. This is actually an intracellular enzyme, and you should not have too much of it in the blood. In fact, it's a biomarker for things like meningitis, heart attack, depending on because different organs express a different isoform of the enzyme, and their blood tests, they can distinguish between the different isoforms. It can tell you where it's coming from. But if it's basically overall, if all the isoforms are elevated beyond a certain level, basically now it's becoming a relatively well-established biomarker of advancing cancer. And the reason it's happening is most likely because cancer cells are starting to eat everything around them. And when they suck the mitochondria out of that cell and that cell dies and ruptures, it's spitting out its contents into the bloodstream, and you're seeing, elevated levels of LDH.
Are these the microtubules, the matrix? Is that the same thing?
Similar, but only cancer cells have them, or at least so far they haven't been seen in normal cells.
Fantastic. Thanks for that, Georgie. I wish we should take a caller, but I'm completely not set up for that right now. What else? What other articles here? Or maybe I should do a little advertisement here. Okay, guys, subscribe to t.me/DannyRoddy. Regularly updating that with content. I do coaching on patreon.com/DannyRoddy. You can follow Georgie on twitter.com/hateit, idealabsdc.com. And Georgie, why don't you tell us about the experiments you're running?
Let's see. I'm running so many of them. Currently a study ongoing we're repeating the study with vitamin B1 and B3 on cancer with a higher dose of vitamin B1. Because if you remember, I sent you the graph of basically the B1 and B3 stopped the growth of the cancer, but didn't make the tumors disappear. So now I'm increasing the dosage of B1 because it's acting as a carbonic anhydrase inhibitor, and I'm hoping that we'll be able to actually get some of those tumors to disappear, to have a curative effect, even if it's in only 1 or 2 animals. Another study that we will be running soon is with several of the fatty acid oxidation inhibitors that we synthesized, the custom ones, that are about 60 to 100 times more potent than meldonium. So we'll test a few of them on several cancer models, and the one that does the best we'll probably release as a product. We have the methoxyharmalan. I don't know if you saw that.
Yeah.
We released that as a product. And there are 2 other serotonin antagonists that are being developed. We already have a little bit of the sinanserin. I tried it, and several other people tried it. The consensus is that basically it seems to have a very potent antiviral effect, because several people had what they felt like it was a cold or a flu and immediately stopped it. But it didn't have like the other effects that we typically look for in a serotonin antagonist, such as the elevation of mood, or like improving digestion and things like that. I think it's a very fairly selective antagonist of the 5-HT2A subreceptor. And that one I think is what contributes to its antiviral effects, but it's not sufficient for the whole spectrum of anti-serotonin effects that we typically looking for, because it's the 5-HT2C receptor, which is responsible for controlling the synthesis of cortisol. So if you're looking for an antidepressant effect, you have to look at a serotonin antagonist capable of blocking 5-HT2C. Things that are blocking 5-HT2A tend to have an anti-hallucinogenic effects. In other words, they can block the hallucinogenic effects of LSD, and they tend to have apparently a fairly potent antiviral effect. The Chinese are using unofficially sinanserin as treatment for COVID, and basically that's about it. So it's not. I don't think it's a commercially viable thing. The synthesis is not easy, and the effects seem to be limited to taking care of viruses and viral infections. We're still working on synthesizing the other one, the Russian version of cyproheptadine, I guess you can call it. It's called tropoxin.
Mm-hmm.
It is structurally similar to another serotonin antagonist, which I think was tried clinically in the United States briefly. It's known as tropanserine. So both of these drugs have troponin as a component of the molecule. So that one I haven't tried yet. I'm waiting for a shipment, and then I'll let you know how it goes. It's basically supposed to be a non-selective serotonin antagonist, similar to cyproheptadine, but without its sedation properties, because it doesn't have much activity on the histamine system.
Are you saying this Harmaline is kind of a bust? Like it didn't do the things that you thought it would?
No, Harmaline did. The sinanserin didn't.
Oh, okay. Totally checked out. Okay. And then what else?
What are we doing? Well, we're getting that machine for the analysis of the hair, nails, and potentially other samples that people will be sending us.
Is that machine for something else, and then you figured out you could use it for both, or is it strictly for measuring the steroid?
No, it's a look. It basically, you give it like a solution, and you tell it what specific substances you want it to find, and if they're there, then it gives you a quantitative analysis of how much of each substance is in there. So it's kind of like a middle of the road. Like if there's like a bronze, silver, and a gold version of this machine, this is like the upper range of the bronze. So it's a workhorse, can do a lot of analysis cheaply, but you have to know what you're looking for. The high end of the machine of this type of machines, you can basically give it an unknown sample and say, give me everything that you find in that sample. So we'll see how this machine goes. We're renting it. If it works well, we may then rent the high-end version, which then we may be able to use for analysis such as, even this one. I can try to analyze some food samples that are being sold here. Let's say like some organic milk. Okay, does it contain silicon dioxide? Does it contain talc? Does it contain titanium dioxide? Because we know their molar mass, so we can look for those. But if you want to analyze a completely unknown sample, such as I'll give you pregnenolone, a pregnenolone powder, we'll dissolve it, right? And then that Ray has opined that there may be some estrogenic metabolites there, right? But there's so many different types of estrogens that are out there. We don't know exactly what we're looking for. We can say, okay, check for estradiol. I doubt it's going to be there.
Mm-hmm.
It's not a known byproduct of chemical synthesis. But there are other ones. There are some pregnanes are usually not estrogenic, right? But there may be some like androstanes that are similar to DHEA, like a 6-hydroxy DHEA. It's actually fairly estrogenic. So it may be some of that, because pregnenolone, when it's given to bacteria, and bacteria are everywhere, when they tend to metabolize it for their own needs, and some of the things that they spit out as output as a waste are some of these estrogenic, these metabolites of pregnenolone that have estrogenic effects. So if we're going to be looking for something like that, which is I think it will be it will be analysis that will be greatly beneficial to the entire community. That machine cannot do that. That machine can only look for things that you already know, that you suspect are there, or at least you know what they look like, and you can tell the machine the binary question: are they there? Yes or no? And if yes, tell me how much of each is in there.
That's amazing. That's really incredible. Yeah.
So the people that I work with are chemists.
Mm-hmm.
That's their thing. They love working with these machines, and they like so they synthesize things, right? But now that are basically like we're starting to interact more, they're getting very interested in the metabolic idea. We're going to start publishing studies, in vivo studies with several of these things on cancer. All of them kind of like designed by me, right? They're only there for like they're for the credentials, but they're very interested and they're learning. And now other people are joining. They're biologists. We have 2 or 3 medical doctors that expressed interest in joining. So all of these like the different studies that we'll be doing, this machine can help. So we're gonna also try to do maybe some herbal extracts. Like basically, there are a lot of things on the market that are being sold that are herbal extracts without any confirmation whether they even contain what they claim to contain. So the famous example, the one that many people are interested in, is like the Tribulus terrestris, that phytoandrogen, right? Well, unless it contains a specific amount of that steroid protodiosine, a steroidal saponin, it probably is not going to have that much of an androgenic effect. So we're going to analyze some extracts and see if we can, maybe publish some of that. So yeah, there's a lot of potential and a lot of opportunity to play with this machine and do some interesting things. It all comes down to how much time I have because, like I said, this is just a side activity. I have another job.
Amazing stuff. Okay, let's talk about these last 2 DHT ones and then get out of here.
Yeah, I think this one is really good because it's one of the few studies, or actually not one of the few, but it matches well with another one which showed that androgens have an anti-aging effect by activating the clotho gene. And actually, I think Ray told several people over email. There was this lady whose husband was very, very sick. He had like a chronic kidney disease for years. And basically Ray suggested that if she can get her hands on some DHT, it will help the husband, not only mentally, because I think the guy was severely depressed out of this, because of this chronic disease, but also because it will help recover the kidneys. And if you remember, we have a study that showed that DHT on its own helped, and aromatase inhibitor on its own also helped, but the combination of both cured the kidney disease, the kidney failure. And Ray, she showed me that email that he sent to her, and basically he said there that androgens have an anti-aging effect. So it takes some time to sense that effect, but once you use an androgen for a little bit of, let's say, like a few weeks or a month, then the effects are very long-lasting. And unless you get back into like a hypoestrogenic state, these effects can last for years. So he was basically telling her, look, I think most of the issue is that his kidneys are like prematurely aged for his age. And one of the few things that I know to reverse that process is like an androgen. Kidneys are highly responsive to androgens. They express the androgen receptor, I think, more than almost any other tissue except the prostate and the penis in males. So they're probably the most androgenically sensitive organ in the body across both sexes. So this study demonstrates that DHT can actually stop the senescence of the insulin-producing beta cells in the pancreas. And it's known that with aging over time, the amount of insulin that people are able to produce declines. And basically they get into a situation of like almost like they call it old people diabetes. There are 3 types of diabetes. There's actually 4. But there's like the diabetes type 1 where the pancreas completely failed in young people. Then you have diabetes type 2 where you're producing insulin, but you're not reacting well to it. It's not enough, right? You're insulin resistant. And then there's the so-called old people diabetes, which this is what the study is kind of mimicking. And let me just turn on the light because it's suspicious.
Guys, thank you so much. Sincerely appreciate you guys hanging out on Friday night. I'll be doing a Q&A next week, and then I think maybe there will be a week off, and then it will be Ray. I can't remember the schedule, but anyways, Ray will be back on the 30th. I'll do a Q&A next week, and then we sincerely appreciate you guys hanging out on Friday night with us. Continue, Georgie.
So they demonstrated that DHT can fully stop that aging process of the pancreas, and it's one of the most sensitive organs. I mean, even a mild increase in the free fatty acids in the blood can wreak absolute havoc, and they've demonstrated you can actually make yourself diabetic temporarily by going for a long run. Like I remember that study that I posted on marathon runners basically having kidney disease, kidney failure for a few days after the run. Well, the same thing actually apparently happens for the pancreas as well. So you're insulin resistant and potentially even diabetic for a few days after running a full marathon. And it's the fatty acids that do this damage. But also it's been shown that long distance runners, despite what they claim they have that good insulin sensitivity, their pancreas is fibrotic. So this constant exertion and the onslaught of PUFA into the bloodstream leads to the premature aging of the pancreas. And this study showed that DHT can stop that. And the mechanism through which it worked was it's, again, anti-inflammatory and anti-fibrotic, which corroborates the other study that is just as anti-inflammatory as cortisol. So just, all of these studies that for this podcast that you see, they're all kind of reinforce each other, and they're published by different groups. They don't reference, they don't quote each other's studies, which, as we discussed before, it's usually a sign that it's a legit finding.
Also, it has a foundation.
Oh, and by the way, the dosages that were used here. So DHT worked in any dose, right? But even in massive doses, it had absolutely no side effects on the cell because there was an in vitro study. So the highest concentration of DHT they used was 100 micromoles per liter. So you need about 500 milligrams to get that kind of concentration inside of the tissues. 500 milligrams is something that will probably make Ray puke. I mean, as you know, he's told people 1 or 2 milligrams are probably okay, right? 10, he thinks it's extremely unphysiological, and 500 is just out of the question. But even at those massive amounts, massive concentration inside of the cell, DHT had no negative influence on cell viability or the production of insulin. Quite to the contrary, actually. It managed to stop fully the senescence process.
Amazing. And outro, Georgie, what else is going on in your life?
I don't know, keeping fingers crossed that they're not going to mandate the vaccine for kids in DC. And and that they will finally get rid of the masks for kids in schools, because now DC has removed the mandate for masks for all other places, but they remain in schools, which to me is terrible because it's the kids that are really suffering. These masks are damaging their breathing. So we'll see what happens. But two things: I hope schools don't close because of the Omicron variant, and two, I hope that the mayor comes back to her senses and removes the last vestige of this charade. And I guess the third thing is I'm waiting for the cyber attack on the banking system, which you already showed at the beginning.
I'm sure we talked about this, but what about have you talked to your children and said, hey, if they try to, can't kids give their consent or something to get a vaccine?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I've kind of told him in no certain terms. Basically, I said, look, don't be afraid to tell daddy if anybody tries to do something to you at school, especially if they're wearing a white coat, and especially if it's a teacher or anybody else. And they kind of looked at me and said, so what are you going to do, daddy? I'm like, well, I've never used a weapon on another person before, but I don't think I will hesitate. And in fact, I suspect that, hey, I may even have a chance in court, because this mandatory vaccination, especially secret and behind your back, it may constitute child abuse. And several courts have actually acquitted people that have gone after the assailant of their children. And I think one person even killed the perpetrator and still got acquitted. There was a famous case in, of course, Texas, maybe not the best example, because they fully approve of you shooting anybody who is even stealing your car. Yeah. I wouldn't go that far, right? But there was a famous case. I think somebody's daughter she was sexually assaulted, about to be raped, and basically somebody showed up, interrupted the whole act, and the person ran away. The dad found out, got his gun, went around the neighborhood, found the guy, shot him to death, and got acquitted. Oh. So, anyways, I think forcibly injecting poison into your children's bodies constitutes as equivalent to rape for me.
I don't want this episode to be used at your trial, though, George.
Hey, look, I'm telling you directly, I'm considering this self-defense or defending my children.
Yeah, but
whether the court agrees or not is a different story. But there's precedent, and actually, it's not just one or two cases.
But a normal CNN viewer would think that was insane, because everybody knows that vaccines are 1,000% safe and no harm has ever.
So why do they have to go around my back and inject my children forcefully and without my knowledge if they're so good for you?
You know what? I never really thought about this was you make supplements, you understand that process. The manufacturing of billions of vaccines, how did that happen so fast? Somebody was saying
they were ready. They already prepared. That
they worked in the industry, and that it was completely implausible that. What was the time span from Project Warp Speed? Was that was less than a year for the synthesis of how it worked? And then to the production phase was just so ridiculous.
The production was only 2 or 3 months,
and
God. They already had billions of doses ready.
Billions. That,
and by the way, keep in mind, at least the Pfizer vaccine, which was the first one to be released, it's the most sensitive to temperatures. So they had billions of vaccines produced and kept in extremely
deep underground
delicate conditions.
Bases.
Yeah, that can, in order for you to keep these billions of vaccines in these conditions, I mean, you must have like these special facilities and prepare in advance, probably for years in advance, in order to have all these refrigerators, have them all tested, right? And make sure that they don't spoil, they don't like turn themselves off, and that a sufficient amount of the vaccine remains after a certain amount of time. All of these things must have been done before that. You can't just produce a vaccine and say, oh, we think it's going to do well at negative 20 degrees Celsius, right? And then just basically start distributing and telling everybody that. In order for you to do that, you must have done it probably at least 10 times in the lab, confirm that it actually works and remains viable, right? This takes years to do. I don't think they did it a few times and said, no worry, yes, 20. And these specific temperatures, right? Why exactly 20? Is it 22? Like negative 22 degrees centigrade? It's not a random number. It was selected. It's obvious that it's being tried and tested, and God knows, how far in advance. So I think Operation Warp Speed was simply transferring the money to the vaccine companies and telling them you have the green light. I think the actual production, the design and the production of a vaccine happened long before that.
22 is probably some weird occult Freemason number that they had to put in there.
Yeah, I guess they're all either obsessive compulsive or they're all going according to some kind of a numerology. Wasn't some of these secret texts, weren't they all like had these special fate in numbers, like specific numbers? It was very numerology based. It's like there's like a 8 is like an occult number. It's like a sacred number. 3, I think, is another one. They have these specific numbers that they go by in their daily lives. There are many, but I think there's several of them that are really key.
I'm sure. I mean, I go to this website every month. It's not super highbrow advanced dissemination of this stuff, but they gather all the photos of people with one eye, and it's just like an incredible amount of celebrities and things like that. But yeah, they're all whacked out and weird. Remember Wayfair?
Oh yeah, the child traffic, that was selling furniture. Yeah.
Guys, subscribe on
these special code words, right?
Subscribe on TV.me/Team if the Generative Energy podcast gets nuked after this episode. But yeah, just obviously this is part of the whole thing, the weird occult stuff. Anyways, okay, is there anything else before we wrap it up here?
I think that's pretty much it.
Oh, he said Morado says 8 is Saturn, and obviously they have an obsession with Saturn.
Yeah, I think because I keep seeing 8, and basically there's like a Section 8, and there's apparently like a government a black ops assassin squad. They call themselves Section 8. There's a movie called Basic with John Travolta and I think Kristen Nielsen. Watch it when you can. Basically, they talk about there's like a group of course, they were the good guys in the movie. They were fighting against the drug dealers, but they were drug dealers themselves. And they call themselves Section 8. So Section 8, there's like an urban legend that there's like a deep state within the deep state, and they call themselves Section 8.
Did we talk about this? I asked Ray, I was like, what is their obsession with Saturn? And then I was like, does it relate to the, did you ever watch the Symbols of an Alien Sky documentary?
Yeah, they said that basically Saturn kind of passed through, wreak havoc in the solar system, and Venus used to be part of Earth or something, long time ago, and Saturn crashed into the Earth and made the Venus and the Earth separate. Yeah.
So this this graphic, the biggest part. Let me just orient it here. The biggest part is Saturn, and Sun is in the back of Saturn. And then this red thing right here is Mars. And then I think, oh man, am I fucking this up? I think this was Venus. Mm-hmm. And then I'm screwing this up. Anyways, there's a different conformation of the Earth back then. And so that's why I was like, Ray, are they so obsessed with Saturn? Because they think they know some history that most people don't know. But this, if this documentary is right, they kind of nailed it. But anyways, that obsession with Saturn is really interesting to me. But
how is this going to help them in the future? Are they expecting something similar to Saturn is the controller, the Antichrist that's coming back to Earth? after a certain amount of time?
We're going to have to pass those questions to the chat. I honestly don't know, but it would be, I'm trying to like think of how they initiate some weirdo celebrity that like craves power. And if they say something like, we can tell you the origins of the planet and like there used to be Saturn used to be and block out the sun and things like that. That might be compelling or something like that to get them to do all their weird shit and stuff. But
so how will they prove this to the actual celebrity? I mean, like if I'm a hungry power person, I mean, you can just say just about anything, as long as I trust you. I mean, you can talk about aliens and like in unicorns and I'll probably believe it.
I don't know. That's a very good question. I'm sure people
they can tell you a story about the origins of the solar system and how Saturn is like at the core of it. But what evidence is there? I mean, I guess we have to attend one of those initiation events and see what evidence they present.
We'll have to do an eyes wide shut type of thing. Get in on that.
That's right.
Okay. On that note, guys, thank you so much for watching today. Sincerely appreciate it on a Friday night. So I'll be back next week, and then Georgie will join me again with Ray Pete on the 30th. And that will be the last show of the year. And this year has been really fantastic. I think we've done a lot of these shows this year. It's grown.
Oh, you're talking about the shows? Because yeah, it's been fantastic, man.
Oh, dude.
The full-blown fascism all over the world.
Oh, yeah. I was strictly speaking about the growth of the Degenerative Energy podcast. Not that this year has been fantastic. Far from it. But I mean, it's poetic that the podcast grows in popularity as the disintegration of society.
It's one of the few therapeutic things remaining probably that people can enjoy, because everything else coming through the TV. Have you actually, when was the last time you watched TV?
I'm not saying this to sound cool. I really have
So it was a long time ago, basically.
Yeah, I can't recall. I mean, but
I challenge you, if you ever watch or if you ever get access to an American TV, or like actually not just American, any TV, in general.
This is a total lie. My biggest secret that I never tell anybody is that I'm very into MMA. So I do watch all the commercials. I mean, not intentionally, I mute them, but so that I do watch TV. Yeah.
Okay. I challenge you to find me anything outside of MMA that is like even remotely non-harmful for your psyche and for your cognition. I haven't been able. I mean, I'm looking at these shows that are basically cable TV at this point, unless you're into some even some of the naturalistic stuff like Nat Geo. Mm-hmm. It's become so commercialized and so ad-driven and so scripted. That I already lost interest. I used to like all of these episodes they had about nature, and they started doing like the Morgan Freeman ones about the universe and how it was going to disappear because the second law of thermodynamics ensures that everything dies and collapses. And I'm like, oh, okay. So anyways, challenge you to find me anything interesting, educational, and non-harmful on any channel. If you do, let me know.
I'm going to look immediately. Georgie, thank you so much, as always. My Bulgarian wizard brother, thank you so much. And, okay, so twitter.com/hateit. You're going to work on doing a Telegram channel, and then idealabsdc.com. And you can purchase this, which I paid for full price, 6 bottles, no discount, because I want to support Georgie, and we have no financial relationship. And Georgie, so thank you so much for joining me. Guys, thank you so much for hanging out on Friday. I'll do a Q&A next week. And any parting words, Georgie?
I mean, I think it's whatever's going to happen, terrible or great with the world, we'll see it over the next 6 months probably. The cyber attack, the fascism going on in Europe, in Australia. So it's either make it or break it. I don't think this can continue any longer. I mean, I think most people, not most people, even people that are pro-COVID and pro-mandates, even they agree. They're like, this needs to end. And I keep telling them, I don't think it's going to end unless you make it end. These people never give up.
December 10th, the darkest episode of the Degenerative Energy podcast.
I don't think it's the darkest. It's just telling the truth. And the good news is that even the people that are pro-mandate and pro-pandemic, even they're saying like, what's going on? Why isn't this ending? We've jabbed ourselves 4 or 5 times. Why isn't this ending? Well, I don't know. Why don't you stop drinking Starbucks and, stop watching your phone and look around, and then you'll quickly realize that it's not about a virus.
I'm interested in these normies you talk to, because I got a whiff of that in Thanksgiving, and the people I talked to thought nothing was happening. Nothing is abnormal. Nothing is going on. It's just like a medical thing. Like they didn't sense any kind of looming danger on the horizon or anything. But this was only
so the massive inflation. Well, I guess these people either living in a bubble or somebody else is taking care of their finances or whatnot. I mean, if you live in the world and you have to take care of yourself or somebody else, you'll be hard pressed to say that nothing is happening.
But I think most people are that way. They think that all these things, even that like toned down version that you just said, like what is going on, is like too far out of the realm of most people.
Yeah, the ones that are really lulled into complete obedience by TV and watching their shows. But even those normies, quote unquote, that I'm talking about, they're starting to see that inflation is creeping up, right? Gasoline is expensive. There's shortages of specific foods in the stores, like especially the more high-end ones, like Whole Foods, right? And I mean, these people shop mostly at those stores, and you can hear them, conversing, like, hey, what's going on? There's no milk, there's no meat. Like they keep cooking the same food at the food bar for the last 3 months. This has never happened before. So they're noticing something is happening. I don't think they're making a connection yet. I mean, I agree with you that most of them still think that the virus is a medical thing, but I'm seeing many of the normies starting to get worried about other signs happening at the social level, even though they're not connected to the pandemic. It's hard. I mean, there's so many homeless now in DC that when you walk on the street after a certain time, certain hour, certain areas that used to be relatively safe, at least from attacks by homeless people. I mean, my office is literally like a street away from a local park called McPherson Square, and now there's like maybe 40 tents there, and I don't know how many, maybe close to 100 homeless people. And the worst that I've ever seen was maybe back around 2008, 2009 during the financial crisis, maybe about 10, maybe 15 total, and we thought that was bad. Now it looks like a refugee camp, and it's not just this place, like several other places. So it's hard not to see that. And then of course they start asking each other like, well, what's going on? Where did all these homeless people come from? And the answer is nowhere. They were here. They just weren't homeless before. It's just a lot of these people now that you see. And before, when you look at most of the homeless people, it was quite obvious that these were people that were homeless for a while, right? They all had, like, many of them have a drug problem. I mean, they're, you can see that many of them are not in their right mind. They're older, right? But now you're basically seeing people who look like former, like, white-collar workers who just fell on hard times, and now they're homeless too. So it's hard not to notice that. So the normies are getting anxious, and I think they want this to end, but they're still not connecting it to the pandemic. So maybe a cyber attack on their bank accounts, or maybe another food shortage or something like that. Maybe that will finally be the straw that breaks the camel's back.
Yeah, that food shortage combined with inflation, like if people went psycho over toilet paper, think of what they're going to do with food or water.
Expensive and also shortage, right? So it's not only like you're going to be paying more, but you can't even buy the stuff that you want.
Yeah.
So if that happens, I think that would be a wake-up call. That maybe why like the powers that be are so desperate to prevent that, because if you want a large-scale social commotion, get like remove the food and you're going to get another color revolution, just like in the Arab countries.
But order out of chaos. Why would they not want that why would they not want that to happen?
I personally think they're not ready of like getting their act together and being protected to avoid the side effects of this commotion. I mean, it's not only about the elite. It's like smaller, like lower levels, still elite, still billionaires, maybe not like, like at the cabal level, right? But, they have property, they have businesses, right? I mean, they're not ready for the full-scale collapse of society because they're going to lose money. And these people have influence. They may not be calling all the shots, but they may have local influence. And until they're sufficiently confident that they've taken everything of value and shipped it elsewhere, like where it's safer, or converted it to digital currency, or whatever else they're doing with their assets, I think those are people who are resisting like the full-blown collapse. Yeah, no doubt that whoever prints the money, controls the currency and all that, they probably would love to see a collapse in the United States, full collapse in the United States and Europe.
I hope I'm wrong and that you're right.
Yes.
Georgi Dinkov, thank you so much. Sincerely appreciate it. Again, guys, we have an amazing audience. I've been watching the chat this whole time. You guys are amazing. Thank you so much. Subscribe on t.me/Danny Roddy and maybe on Odyssey or something. And then I'll be back Q&A next week. Then Ray and Georgie will be back on the 30th. Guys, thank you so much. Have a safe week. We'll talk to you guys soon. Georgie, once again, thank you so much. And we're out. Bye, everyone.
Peace.
Bye.